Picture a packed Hong Kong restaurant. Now imagine all eyes are glued to one table not because of Bruce Lee but because of the notorious triad enforcer standing over him. Suddenly a sharp, stinging slap cuts through the noise, a public humiliation. The room falls dead silent, waiting for the explosion, but what happened next wasn't a brawl. It was a blur of motion that supposedly ended the fight in just 3 moves, leaving everyone completely stunned. This is the legendary story of what happens when you humiliate a master. But is it what really happened? That story of the gang leader and the 3-move takedown is one of the most famous legends about Bruce Lee. It's a perfect short film, the quiet hero, the loud-mouthed villain, and a mind-bendingly fast victory. It's dramatic, it's powerful, and it's been told for decades. But the truth is often messier, and in Bruce Lee's case, way more interesting than fiction. While there is no record of this slap ever happening, the myth wasn't just born out of thin air. It's more like a composite sketch, pieced together from very real, high-stakes fights that defined Bruce's life and changed martial arts forever. To get to the bottom of the silent room and the 3-move victory, we have to look past the legend and uncover the real fight that started it all. And that battle wasn't over a slap, but over an idea. Our story starts not in Hong Kong, but in Oakland, California, back in 1964. Bruce Lee was young, driven, and already a bit of a revolutionary. He'd opened his own school, the Junfan Gung Fu Institute, but in the eyes of the traditional martial arts community, he was breaking a sacred rule. He was teaching non-Chinese students. Even more, Lee was publicly criticizing traditional styles, calling some of San Francisco's grandmasters old tigers with no teeth. This mixture of teaching outsiders and what was seen as boastful arrogance rubbed the Chinatown establishment in San Francisco the wrong way. Tensions simmered until an ultimatum was delivered. Lee had to prove his methods in a duel. His opponent was Wong Jack Man, a respected master of Northern Shaolin, Taejokwon, and Xingyiquan. This wasn't some street thug. He was a highly skilled artist representing the very tradition Lee was challenging. A private fight was arranged at Lee's school in Oakland with only a handful of people watching. No cameras, no crowds, just 2 masters about to answer a huge question. Was martial arts a rigid tradition to be preserved or a living art form that could evolve? This is where the story explodes into a dozen different pieces because no one can agree on what happened next. There is no video of the fight, just conflicting stories from the few people who were actually there. According to Bruce Lee's wife, Linda Lee Cadwell, the fight was brutally quick, over in just 3 minutes. She claims Bruce immediately went on the attack, overwhelming Wong Jack Man, who backpedaled and tried to run. The fight supposedly ended with Lee pinning Wong to the ground and yelling, "Do you give up?" until he submitted, a clear, decisive victory. But Wong Jack Man and his supporters tell a completely different tale. They say the fight was a grueling 20-25-minute marathon. They claim Lee started dishonorably, faking a handshake to go for an eye poke. They argue Wong neutralized most of Lee's attacks and even had him in a headlock at one point. In their version, the fight ended in a draw when both men were exhausted, with Wong claiming he held back from using his most dangerous kicks to avoid crippling Lee. One eyewitness, David Chin, offered a middle ground, saying the fight lasted about 7 minutes before Lee got Wong to submit. No matter who you believe, one fact is undisputed. Bruce Lee was incredibly unhappy with his own performance. In his mind, whether it took 3 minutes or 20, the fight was clumsy and took way too long. He had been forced to chase his opponent, and his traditional Wing Chun training had left him gassed. That fight was the moment he realized the limits of clinging to a single style. It was messy, inefficient, and a far cry from the fluid, decisive combat he pictured in his head. This single, frustrating battle became the crucible that forged his new philosophy. It was here he decided to break free from what he called the classical mess of rigid, outdated styles. A real fight, he realized, is chaotic and unpredictable. To win, a martial artist had to be like water, able to adapt, to borrow from any style, and to express themselves completely. This was the birth of Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. It wasn't a new style, but a new way of thinking. Its core idea was no way as way, having no limitation as limitation. And the seed for this revolution was planted in the sweat and frustration of his duel with Wong Jack Man. The real victory wasn't beating another man, it was conquering his own limitations. So how does a private, messy duel over philosophy become a clean, dramatic legend about a public slap? The myth grew by blending this real fight with other events and, most importantly, with Bruce Lee's movies. There are other anecdotes, though likely just as legendary, that probably fueled the myth. One popular story claims Lee once neutralized 3 drunk men in a restaurant without even getting out of his chair, using only precise pressure point strikes. While this story isn't verified, it perfectly illustrates the kind of calm, effortless control people associated with him. Then came the films. In his 1972 movie The Way of the Dragon, Lee's character defends his family's restaurant from mafia thugs. The scenes are iconic. A tense room, a sudden explosion of action, and a group of stunned onlookers watching Lee dispatch his foes with lightning speed. The fictionalized 1993 biopic, Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, added to this by staging a huge brawl where Lee takes on several aggressive kitchen workers, further blurring the line between his real life and his movies. When you weave all these threads together, the intense duel with Wong Jack Man, the popular anecdotes of his real-world calm, and his unforgettable movie scenes, the legend of the gang leader starts to make sense. It's a simplified, hyper-dramatic retelling of a much deeper truth. The myth of the three-move takedown is popular because it's simple. It's good versus evil, quiet strength versus loud aggression. But the real story of Bruce Lee is far more impressive. It isn't about a man who could end a fight in a few seconds. It's about a man who, after a grueling battle, had the humility and the genius to question everything he knew. He turned a frustrating victory or a messy draw into the spark for a revolution in martial arts that's still going today. The real power of Bruce Lee wasn't just in his fists, it was in his mind. It was his relentless drive for self-improvement, his courage to shatter tradition, and his understanding that the goal isn't just to win a fight, but to honestly express yourself. The silent room in the legend is a cool image, but the real legacy is the global conversation he started, one about freedom, adaptability, and the limitless potential of the human spirit. So what do you think is more impressive, the legendary takedown or the real-life journey that gave us Jeet Kune Do? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy digging into the true stories behind the greatest myths, make sure to like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.